Have you ever felt as if you were living in automatic mode, doing everything you should, but still with that nagging feeling that something is missing? There was a man in his 40s, a father of two, with a good job and a comfortable home. On paper, he had it all, but every day he woke up with an emptiness he couldn't explain. Until one day, he stopped looking outside for answers and started listening to what came from within. This subtle change led him to a discovery. His life wasn't guided by his true intentions, but by other people's expectations. This made him rethink everything. He discovered that the reality around him was not something fixed, but a vibrational response to what he felt, thought, and deeply desired. This story, although simple, raises a question that few have the courage to ask. Is the reality you live in actually an accurate reflection of your inner state? Perhaps it seems too esoteric at first glance, but here's something curious. Science already knows that our thoughts and emotions are not just reactions. They shape the chemistry of our brain, the behavior of our cells, and consequently, the decisions we make every day. This isn't magic, it's neuroscience. Psychiatrist Jeffrey Schwartz from UCLA has shown that the simple act of redirecting attention can literally change the brain physically. Imagine this. Your every thought is a frequency, and like a radio station, what you tune into is exactly what you hear or experience. So the question is, what frequency have you been living your life on? We're talking about something that goes beyond superficial positivity. It's about learning to raise your vibrational state, not just as a nice idea, but as a daily, conscious practice, almost like tuning an instrument before a big performance. If you play out of tune, the music of your life sounds confused. But when you find the right note, when you're aligned with what really matters, something changes. You start to notice coincidences, unexpected encounters, doors opening. And no, it's not coincidence, it's resonance. That's why in this video, we're going to explore how to access this higher frequency. We're going to talk about intention, awareness, and the power you have to transform your life from the inside out. We're going to dive into a journey where science and spirituality meet and where the invisible can finally make sense. But before we go any further, answer yourself. Are you ready to attune your life to what is most true in you? Because that's exactly where it all begins. Imagine that your mind is like an antenna. Every day it picks up and emits invisible signals as if it were connected to a power station that shapes the way you perceive and interact with the world. This idea, which sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, has been studied for decades and is now closer to science than many people realize. One of the most intriguing concepts supporting this view is that of vibrational frequency. The idea that our thoughts, emotions, and intentions emit a vibration that directly influences our external reality. It may sound mystical, but when you understand how it works, manifestation stops being an empty promise and becomes a real and accessible tool. Everything in the universe vibrates. This is a fact proven by quantum physics. From subatomic particles to celestial bodies, everything moves at a certain frequency. In 1927, French physicist Louis de Broglie was awarded the Nobel Prize for proving that all matter has wave characteristics, i.e., everything vibrates at some level. If everything vibrates, then it's natural to conclude that our thoughts, which are also electrical impulses, also have a frequency. The human brain, for example, operates in different brainwave ranges. When we are in states of deep relaxation or intense meditation, we enter states called gamma, whose waves oscillate between 40 and 100 hertz. These states have been associated with expanded consciousness, mental clarity, and even experiences of deeper intuition. In 2004, researchers from the University of Wisconsin monitored Buddhist monks during meditation and identified intense activity in the gamma frequency. What does this tell us? That certain higher mental states are not just subjective experiences, but have a measurable neurological pattern. When we talk about manifestation, this is exactly what matters. Your mind needs to be vibrating in tune with what you want to attract. It's not enough to wish for something with words if, internally, you vibrate in scarcity, fear, or insecurity. Manifestation only becomes possible when your frequency is in harmony with what you want to experience. Manifestation begins from the inside out. This means that the outside world is just a reflection of an internal vibrational field. If you tune into the radio station of scarcity, all you'll hear is the noise of lack. But when your vibration is set to the frequency of abundance, trust, and clear intention, the results begin to appear almost automatically. It's not coincidence, it's vibrational resonance. And this has a scientific explanation. The concept of entrainment, or synchronization, was first observed in 1665, when Dutch physicist Christian Huygens noticed that two pendulums placed side by side ended up moving in sync. Nature seeks balance and harmony, and so do the energy fields around us. In the context of manifestation, this means the following. When you raise your vibration, you begin to attract people, opportunities, and circumstances that vibrate at the same frequency. This is not magic. It's a natural phenomenon that can be trained. The practice of meditation, for example, is one of the most effective ways of raising your brain frequency. Another way is to engage in activities that put you in a state of flow. That moment when you lose track of time because you're so connected to what you're doing that your vibration aligns with who you really are. When manifesting, think of three pillars: clarity, coherence, and constancy. Clarity to know what you really want, coherence to align thought, emotion, and action, and constancy to keep your vibration stable, even when reality hasn't yet reflected what you want. Manifestation is not a magic trick, but an internal technology that works when understood and applied with awareness. Your frequency is your energetic signature in the universe, and what you receive back is almost always a mirror of what you are emitting. Now that you understand how manifestation and vibrational frequency are deeply connected, think for a moment. What have you been vibrating lately? If the answer isn't what you'd like to attract, maybe it's time to change the station. The journey of manifestation begins with a simple act of presence, being aware of what you feel, what you think, and what you want. Because, at the end of the day, the universe always responds to your vibration. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that there is a kind of invisible thread connecting your mind to an intelligence that is beyond ordinary logic. A subtle but incredibly powerful field that doesn't communicate with words, but with sensations, intuitions, and creative impulses. This is the starting point for understanding one of the most mysterious and fascinating topics in personal and spiritual development: channeling. Contrary to what many people think, channeling doesn't mean receiving supernatural messages or going into a mystical trance. It's about attuning your consciousness to a higher dimension of information where answers, ideas, and directions seem to come with surprising clarity, as if you had unlocked an advanced mode of your own mind. This phenomenon is directly connected to the concept of higher consciousness, a layer of the mind that goes beyond linear thinking and immediate logic. Think of consciousness as a ladder. On the lower rungs, you find practical reasoning, everyday judgments, doubts, and fears. But as you climb, you reach levels where perception expands, intuition intensifies, and connections become faster and deeper. Higher consciousness is that high floor, an inner space where you access not only what you know, but also what is beyond your direct experience. From a scientific point of view, this idea is gaining more and more ground. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg, a specialist in neurotheology, has shown in studies with monks and meditators that during states of deep meditation, certain areas of the brain responsible for the notion of ego and separation partially deactivate, while other areas linked to creativity and spiritual connection become more active. In other words, there is a measurable brain pattern that corresponds to states of connection with what we call higher consciousness. It's not just about faith or belief, but a real state of mind, documented by imaging scans and consistent neurological patterns. But how does this translate into everyday life? Channeling happens, for example, when you have a sudden, brilliant idea while showering or walking without thinking about anything. When you feel a strong intuition to make a decision, even without apparent logic, and then realize you were right. Or when you're writing, creating, or solving a problem, and you feel that someone inside is leading the process perfectly. That's channeling. It's accessing a cleaner, deeper level of your own wisdom. And we all have this ability, but few learn to use it clearly. To channel with intention, you need to develop what the ancients called a state of silent presence. This means slowing down your thoughts, reducing mental noise, and creating an inner listening space. In a society hyper-stimulated by notifications, obligations, and constant stimuli, this silence has become a luxury, but also a necessity. When you allow yourself this space, you begin to hear what was previously drowned out by the noise of the world. Ideas that come out of nowhere, emotions that make sense without logical explanation, solutions that you would never consider with rational thought. Another important key to channeling is emotional frequency. States such as gratitude, love, and trust make it easier to open this channel. Emotions such as anger, fear, or anxiety tend to block it. This is because your emotions adjust your vibration, and it's only possible to pick up information from a higher level when you're on the same wavelength. It's like trying to listen to classical music with the radio tuned to a heavy rock station. The signal doesn't connect. This is why practices such as conscious breathing, meditation, and contemplation are so effective. They adjust your frequency and fine-tune your internal antenna. In short, channeling is not the exclusive gift of gurus or mediums. It's a human skill that can be cultivated with practice, intention, and awareness. When you learn to access this level of perception, not only does your creativity expand, but your life begins to flow with more lightness, clarity, and purpose. Because in the end, higher consciousness isn't something outside of you. It's a dimension of your own being that's just waiting to be accessed. And when that channel opens, the extraordinary becomes accessible. Imagine that every event in your life, every person you've met, every decision you've made, every crossroads you've passed through, is connected by invisible threads, as if they were part of a larger tapestry. And now think, what if this tapestry was woven by a conscious force, a creative intelligence that works behind the scenes of existence? This is where we enter the universe of intention and its direct connection with what many call the divine source. Contrary to what some people think, intention is not just wishing something hard or repeating positive affirmations. Intention is direction with purpose. It is energy set in motion from an inner state of alignment, not lack. True intention is born when there is clarity between what you feel, think, and believe. It doesn't arise from haste or desperation, but from a point of stillness and certainty. The divine source, whether you call it God, the universe, universal consciousness, or the unified field, is where all this creative energy originates. It is the place before time, where everything already exists in a potential state, just waiting for a compatible vibration to manifest. When you think clearly and feel with conviction, you don't just emit a wish, you activate a code, and this code is interpreted by the very structure of the universe as a creative order. Various spiritual traditions and even contemporary studies point to this. One notable example comes from physicist David Bohm, who in 1980 proposed the existence of an implicate order, a dimension of reality where everything is connected, even though it is invisible to our eyes. For Bohm, the visible universe is just a projection of this deeper order, where information is stored non-locally. In other words, the reality we see is just the tip of the iceberg, and what really shapes events is in a subtle and intelligent field, exactly what we call here the divine source. But how do we connect to this creative source? The first step is to understand that this source is not out there, it pulses within you. Every beat of your heart, every breath in and out of your body are already manifestations of this creative energy at work. What often prevents this connection is internal noise, doubts, conditioning, resentment, and excessive control. Instead of trying to manipulate reality, the true path of intention is to allow it to flow, like a river that already knows its destination and just needs you not to block its course. This is where the practice of conscious surrender comes in. When you clearly define an intention, the next step is not to force it to come true, but to remain in a state of reception. You act, yes, but from a place of trust. You don't plant a seed today and dig into the soil every day to see if it's growing. You trust in the invisible process of germination. The same goes for your intentions. When you align with Source, you don't have to chase after things. Things start to align with you. And why does this happen? Because you become a magnetic field that vibrates in coherence with what you want. And the Source responds not to your verbal requests, but to your emotional and energetic vibration. If you say you want prosperity, but you vibrate insecurity, the response will be insecurity. If you say you want love, but you're stuck in the fear of rejection, the dominant energy will be fear. The key is to clean the internal filters so that the intention comes out clean, without interference, and reaches the Source as a clear request. Ultimately, the divine source doesn't need to be convinced. It is already generous by nature. What defines what you attract is not deservingness, but attunement. You are not a separate being begging for blessings. You are an active part of the intelligence that creates everything. And intention is your channel of communication with it. When you understand this, every thought ceases to be random and becomes a creative choice. And your life, instead of being a sequence of coincidences, becomes a conscious project of manifestation. In a world where everything competes for your attention, social media, notifications, other people's opinions, constant comparisons, it's easy to forget where the true creative power of your mind comes from. Most people live with their eyes turned outwards, waiting for the outside world to bring them answers, validation, or meaning. This is what is known as objective attention, a kind of focus on what happens outside of ourselves, on events, on people, on circumstances that are beyond our direct control. But there is another way of observing reality, much more transformative and powerful. Subjective attention. It doesn't depend on what's around you, but on what's pulsating inside you. While objective attention is reactive, subjective attention is creative. When you're focused on the external world, you tend to respond to stimuli automatically. If someone criticizes you, you feel bad. If the result of something is not what you expected, frustration arises. If an opportunity doesn't present itself, doubt arises. Objective attention puts you on a kind of emotional autopilot because it's based on something changeable and fickle, the outside world. Subjective attention, on the other hand, does the opposite. It leads you to delve into your thoughts, emotions, and perceptions to understand how you are shaping reality from within. This distinction is fundamental, especially when it comes to conscious manifestation or alignment with higher purposes. Because while your attention is fixed on the external, it's as if you're trying to write your story with the pen in other people's hands. But when you turn to yourself, you take on the role of author. It's like switching from spectator mode to creator mode, and this internal movement has direct implications for the way reality responds to you. In a study published in 2016 by Yale University, researchers observed that states of attention focused on internal processes, such as reflection, contemplation, and active imagination, activate areas of the brain linked to creativity, planning, and conscious decision-making. In contrast, overexposure to constant external stimuli damages these same regions, limiting the capacity for deep analysis and self-knowledge. In other words, the more outward-focused you are, the less able you are to access what really matters inside. Subjective attention is the fertile soil of clear intention. When you focus inwards, you begin to notice subtle patterns. Which thoughts repeat themselves? What emotions arise in certain situations? What beliefs limit your choices? It is in this internal space that you begin to plant new ideas, nurture new possibilities, and break away from old conditioning. It's no wonder that practices such as journaling, meditation, and visualization have gained so much relevance. They're not just relaxing, but tools that strengthen this kind of attention. And this doesn't mean ignoring the external world. It just means that it shouldn't be the starting point for your decisions. When you cultivate a state of inner presence, the outside world stops being a trigger and becomes a mirror. You observe, understand, and interact with greater awareness because you are no longer hostage to circumstances. This brings you more freedom, more focus, and above all, more authenticity. A simple example: imagine that you want to manifest a new professional opportunity. Objective attention makes you focus only on the market, the vacancies available, and the competition. Subjective attention, on the other hand, invites you to ask yourself, what do I really want to create? What impact do I want to generate? What unique skills can I offer? This change of focus alters your energy, your attitude, and even the way you communicate. And that's when doors start to open, not because the world has changed, but because you've changed your frequency from the inside out. So, by choosing where to place your attention, you are, in practice, choosing which reality you want to live in. Subjective attention is not a luxury, it's a key. It connects you with the creative source of your consciousness, with that which doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. And when you learn to cultivate this kind of presence, life stops being a response to chance and becomes an intentional dance between your inner world and the universe around you. From an early age, we are taught to build our identity on the basis of what we do, what we achieve, and how others see us. This process, although apparently natural, gives rise to an internal structure called the ego, a set of beliefs, fears, standards, and expectations that shape how we perceive ourselves in the world. The ego, by definition, wants to protect. It tries to keep you within the safety zone, even if that means limiting your potential. And that's exactly why, in order to access new levels of growth, abundance, and fulfillment, you have to go through a process of ego transformation. It's not a question of eliminating it, but of reframing it, so that it is no longer a prison, but a bridge to your most authentic self. This process begins with a simple realization: the ego thrives on separation. It makes you believe that you are isolated from others, that you are different from what you call divine, and that you need to constantly prove yourself in order to be accepted. This kind of mentality generates anxiety, constant comparison, and fear of not being enough. When you believe that you need to achieve something in order to feel complete, you are reinforcing the idea that in the present moment you lack something essential. This is the illusion of the ego, the belief that you are incomplete by nature. And as long as this view is dominant, manifesting any real transformation becomes extremely difficult. To change this, you need to cultivate what we call a mindset of possibility. Unlike the fixed mindset, which is based on limitations, this new internal attitude starts from the principle that growth is always possible. that every challenge brings with it an opportunity to expand, that your current circumstances don't define your destiny, but only signal where your attention and energy have been invested. This way of thinking is supported by decades of research in positive psychology and neuroscience. Carol Dweck, a researcher at Stanford University, coined the term growth mindset to describe exactly this. People who believe that their abilities can be developed tend to be more successful and resilient in the face of adversity. The transformation of the ego, therefore, begins when you stop looking outside yourself for value, when you stop measuring your self-esteem by material achievements, the opinion of others, or past mistakes. This internal turning point allows for the birth of a new identity based on authenticity, presence, and expansion. And it is at this point that the mindset of possibility flourishes, because by recognizing that you are not your circumstances, but rather the consciousness that interacts with them, you become free to create new stories. You stop being a victim of external conditions and become an active agent of your own narrative. It's important to understand that the ego doesn't disappear overnight. It will still try to take control in moments of insecurity. It will whisper that you're not capable, that you're dreaming too big, or that you need to please others in order to be loved. In these moments, the key is not to fight the ego, but to observe without reacting. When you observe your thoughts with awareness, without judgment, they lose their power. This simple practice is the beginning of liberation. And when this liberation happens, you open up to a universe of new possibilities. You begin to see the world through different eyes. What was once an obstacle becomes a learning experience. What seemed like scarcity reveals space to create. What was pain is now healing material. And all this doesn't happen by chance, but as a natural consequence of a new state of consciousness, where you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, just express what already exists in essence within you. In the end, transforming the ego is not about ceasing to be who you are, but about ceasing to believe that you are only what the world has made you believe. It's about returning home, to that inner point where there is no hurry, comparison, or fear, where there is only presence, purpose, and potential. And when you operate from that place, life begins to respond in a completely different way, because your mind stops being a barrier and becomes a portal. The most important thing isn't what's been said here, it's what you do with it now. Throughout this video, you've discovered that manifesting a new reality isn't a magical act. It's a practical process that starts with the way you position yourself in life. We talked about how your thoughts are not neutral. They have weight, they have frequency, and they shape your actions. You understood that channeling is not the exclusive gift of a few, but a trainable skill, the ability to access your mind at deeper levels, where creativity and intuition flow naturally. And more than that, it became clear that the attention you choose to give, whether external or internal, defines the kind of reality you will experience. But now comes the part that really matters. Are you ready to apply it? Because there's no point in absorbing these ideas as theory if your daily practice is still based on the same mental habits as always. If every time a challenge arises, you go back to looking for solutions outside of yourself, instead of listening to what is already there inside. If you keep living in the expectation that something outside will change to make you feel complete. Real manifestation happens when you take responsibility for directing your own energy. This means aligning your thoughts, emotions, and attitudes with clarity and consistency, and that only depends on you. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. If there's one thing the universe respects, it's intentional action. The clarity with which you act, even in small choices, communicates more than any empty prayer or affirmation. Want to change jobs? Start acting like someone who deserves to be where you want to be. Want to improve your health? Change the way you treat your body today. want to live with more purpose. Then stop wasting energy on what doesn't align with your values. The key is consistency between what you say, what you feel, and what you do. There is no manifestation without movement, and there is no true movement without clear intention. You've also seen here that transforming your ego isn't about destroying who you are, but about reorganizing the way you see yourself. It's exchanging the lens of comparison for a lens of construction. It's getting out of automatic mode and into conscious mode, and from there, make room for a new mental model, one that recognizes that obstacles are part of the process and that each challenge carries an expansion trigger. So here's the final question. Are you going to keep waiting for life to change so you can feel good, or are you going to start changing from the inside to transform your life? The choice is in your hands. You can close this video and continue living in default mode, reacting, surviving, repeating cycles. Or you can use everything you've learned here as fuel for a new phase, clearer, lighter. Now it's up to you. If this content made sense, don't stop here. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the content. Now watch this next video where I show you another essential step to change your reality.